I love the excitement of working in a hospital to be able to help with the patients.
The purpose of the investigation was to verify had there been any wrongdoing.
All of a sudden, I just hear this horrific voice. It's telling me to go.
Suddenly, I saw the body bag move.
I fully believed that I was seeing the ghost.
This just scared the hell out of me.
Special Constable Ron Weir works nights at a large urban hospital.
The shifts go from 6 till 6. They're 12 hours rotating days and nights. In this case, I was working the night shift from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. I love working in a hospital to be able to help with the patients, making sure that they were safe. We would assist with the nursing staff, especially in the ER. One of our main offices was attached to the emergency ward, so we saw anything and everything, ranging from attempted suicide to birth. Our duties were to make sure that certain annexes were closed and locked down for the evening.
On a good night, Ron helps with the living. Tonight, he tends to the dead.
Unfortunately, another aspect of our job was to bring bodies to the morgue discreetly and respectfully. The morgue was located in the basement of the hospital, where we had to go down there in a private elevator. This morgue is just terrifying and creepy. It's very stale, it's very clinical, it's exactly what you expect. Not the highlight of my job at all, let alone having to push a deceased body in a body bag is a little unnerving. There's no mortician. It was set up in such a way that we were in charge of doing that when nobody else was available to do so. I hated going there. It was a fairly large male that had passed away. Suddenly, I saw the body bag move. In that moment, I was completely freaked out and scared. It was terrifying to see that. He'd been clinically processed by the nurse saying he was deceased, and very much so when I saw him when we were putting him in the body bag upstairs.
Ron saw a body twitch in a body bag. From a scientific perspective, this may be something called postmortem spasm, which can cause a leg to twitch or an arm to twitch. From a paranormal perspective, sometimes if a soul is not ready to leave its body, it feels it can't move forward yet, a spirit may try to get back in its body, or it may try to even physically manipulate its body.
I had heard of body twitches and movement happening afterwards. I'm not a doctor. These kind of things have been known to happen in time to time. I've never experienced any of it. Finding that happen to me, I initially thought, is he alive? But what I saw next, there was no scientific explanation. And the gentleman was very much still deceased. It was scary. And that's when I heard, how should I explain it? heard the body say, help me. The voice was muffled. It was very faint. There's no other person in there besides me and the bodies that are in there.
Help!
It was absolutely terrifying.
Help! Help!
Ron flags down an on-call doctor to assist him.
He's alive. His eyes just opened.
You see these things in films, in horror films, where people are coming back to life. There's no scientific explanation to me as to why that would have happened.
But the corpse that Ron heard speak remains deceased.
He was moving in the bag, his hand.
I know what I saw. It was 100% coming from within that body bag that I had just brought down.
As investigators, there's so much evidence that can be obtained at these locations. Everything from seeing active spirits moving through to people hearing disembodied voices. But it's almost the perfect location to have a super haunting, if you will, just because of such a traumatic event happening to so many people in one location.
Ron puzzles over why and how the sound he heard came from the deceased man. And why he moved in death.
This body going down to the morgue, he might have been a scared spirit. I'm not sure, which is maybe why he asked me to help him. Obviously, there's nothing I can do for him. I finished off my paperwork and got the hell out of there.
But within minutes, Ron is embroiled in another hospital emergency.
We received a call on our alarm system that an alarm had been tripped off in the old nurse's annex. You always prepare for the unexpected, especially doing something like this. But I had no idea the history of this building.
Special Constable Ron Weir's night shift is filled with terrifying events he cannot understand.
All the doors were locked and secured. Anytime I had to go into that building, I never enjoyed it too much. It was always a bit of an isolated building, so it had its own heartbeat and vitals. If you put it in that context, it was pretty creepy to have to go in there at nighttime.
But tonight, that feeling takes on a different dimension.
I was getting the feeling that somebody was watching me, almost like a sixth sense. This is what got my heart racing a little bit more, thinking I really didn't want to be in this building any longer than I had to be.
That feeling of being watched has to do with energy. People turn and look, quite often no one is there, but they know that something a little bit beyond the normal is taking place. There's a lot of information coming out of physics right now that prove that just by merely observing an experiment has an effect on that experiment.
I definitely felt uneasy going down the hallway. At this point there, I thought it was more than just, a trip sensor. I did hear some of the doors at the end of the hall rattling. There was nobody in there. There's a lot going through my head at that point. My mind's racing a mile a minute. That's when I noticed that there was a light on the stage.
Ron knows that a minute earlier, the lights had been off.
Went inside. So I proceeded to go through the gym and had to continue to tell myself that there's nobody in here. It's just, it was what it was, and I continued to do my job. Trying to be logical about the whole thing, still feeling a little uncomfortable after coming from that hallway. Trying to go through and do the job the best I could. That's when the lights shut off. In that moment, I was completely freaked out. There's a lot of stories that come from some of the other guys saying that they've had certain circumstances in that particular building. At this point, I thought if there was something supernatural there, that I was going to see something. My heart was going a mile a minute. I was 100% sure that there was nobody in that building other than me. The lights were back on.
What Ron sees next confirms his worst fears.
The door was violently shaking. It felt like somebody was there.
Special Constable Ron Weir is confronted by terrifying and disturbing events at work that defy explanation.
This was an internal door that was shaking violently. This is extremely unusual. The door certainly didn't do this on its own.
The feeling that Ron experiences is not only terrifying, it's frighteningly familiar.
I believe there could have been direct correlation between the body that was in the morgue and the feeling that I had in that annex.
When a ghost transitions to a higher level and they return in spirit form, sometimes they can return and show themselves to a person who would be familiar with them. Ron had just gone through an experience that was beyond the normal.
It could have been he was a lost spirit. Maybe he wasn't ready to move on. I'm not sure, and I never will be 100% sure, but I know if it was the same gentleman there, it could have been because he was angry about passing on.
The banging of the door stops.
When I went back into the gym, there was nobody in there when I went inside.
Ron is overwhelmed by the experience. He considers a world beyond the rational.
Maybe they were seeking me as the last point of contact with that soul. There's countless souls that I had to carry down to the morgue for their next journey into their life. Maybe if that happens, that energy attaches itself to you in some way that they think of you as somebody that's transporting them and you're the last point of contact with them.
It's the middle of the night in this Southern American city. State investigator Marlene Peliser has just been called to work.
I was on call that night. It was around 2 in the morning. A child had died after drowning in a swimming pool. The child had been pronounced dead at the hospital. We were investigating anything that had to do with either child injury or death. The purpose of the investigation was to verify had there been any wrongdoing that led to the event that occurred.
Her investigation will prevent other children from suffering the same fate. Tonight, Marlene feels something she can't rationally explain.
I remember feeling very uneasy. This was uncommon for me to feel this way. I pushed it aside because I was concentrating on what I needed to go and do at that moment. It is very difficult to work in cases where children have either been victimized or have been witnesses to crimes, violence, and not feel that you want to help them on an emotional level, but you realize that that's not what's really going to help them. What they need is somebody to investigate it thoroughly and accurately and dispassionately. That is the best way to help them.
Hi. I need this file, please.
It was very important to speak to the personnel and get from them verbatim what the nature of the injuries were and what they think might have caused it. So I have them turn over any reports that were available to me. I noticed something a little bit off. Like when someone's watching you. And I got that prickly sensation on the back of my neck. I looked around again because I was thinking, is there something I'm not picking up on? And you shake it off because you look around and there's nobody there.
The nurse returns empty-handed. The document Marlene needs isn't yet prepared.
They said, if you come back in maybe an hour, we'll have it ready. I said, I will be back. And at that point, I left. I'd contacted a family member who had agreed to go and open up the premises for me for my investigation.
But as she leaves the hospital, Marlene feels something she cannot explain.
When I got in the vehicle, I still had that feeling, to the point that, as a matter of fact, I remember locking my car doors right away. Normally, I would not do that. I even checked my rearview mirror. I had to think there is something unusual about tonight versus other nights.
Tonight, this normal-looking suburban home is the scene of a crime. Marlene looks for evidence of wrongdoing.
As part of my investigation, especially something which had resulted in a death, would look at, in this case where there was a swimming pool involved, was it safe? How did it occur? I needed to look to see if there was anything that could have contributed to that accident or that death. I started to take pictures, which was one of the most important things. I took a picture of the swimming pool. I took pictures of the fenced area of the yard. If there was any safety features, any toys, access to the backyard. I took pictures of everything that had anything having to do with that backyard area. It was very quiet. This is about 3 in the morning. I start trying to envision how this could have occurred. Even though you're there as an investigator, you're still cognizant that only a few hours ago a child lost their life there. I felt very uneasy. I just couldn't put my finger on why I was feeling that way. But I want to stress that at that point, I'm very analytical in what I'm doing because that is what's required of me. I had gone around to the side of the house. And I heard a splash in the pool area. I was terrified.
Investigating a child's drowning, Marlene Peliser feels an unseen presence.
When I hear the splash, I immediately turn back thinking, first of all, what it could have been. Nothing in the pool that could account for that. But I distinctly heard that. And there was no overhanging trees. There was nothing that could have dropped in there to make that splash. I was afraid, is there something I'm missing? Is somebody behind a bush or somewhere that I'm just not seeing them? And I remember standing there for a few seconds, just trying to reason and figure this out.
Also disturbing to Marlene is that the pool is completely covered and unable to make a splash.
I felt that there was something going on here that wasn't normal or natural, in other words. And I was just plain scared. But I just put that aside and I continued to do my work, which included going to the other side of the house to continue taking pictures. That's when I heard a second splash of something much, much heavier. And even though I did not want to think of it almost as what a body would sound like if it had fallen in the pool. I immediately turned around and went right back. I wasn't sure what I was going to find at that moment. But again, nothing. I had a moment where you realize that the reality of where you're at doesn't coincide with what you're hearing. And that sent a chill down my spine. This just scared the hell out of me.
Why didn't you just get the hell out of there?
I could not leave despite what I was feeling. I was there to do a job, and part of that job is to do a complete and thorough investigation that only could take place at that time, at the initial phase.
Determined to give a voice to the dead, Marlene continues with her investigation.
This house is very quiet. There's no one there. It's a 2-story home. And no one is allowed to be in the home because it is considered a crime scene. I'm in the kitchen taking pictures. I heard some type of noise. And I remember I stopped taking pictures immediately to listen in the silence, like, what was it that I heard? But again, I got that very uneasy feeling that I was not alone there. And then that's when I heard what sounded like footsteps. My first thought is there somebody in the house? I was thinking, did any of the family members, for some reason, come back into the home when they're not supposed to? And immediately I thought, there is somebody upstairs that is not supposed to be here. The footsteps, they were very light, and to me it sounded almost like a child. It was not a heavy-footed step that normally adults make.
Hello? Is someone there?
I decided I'm gonna go upstairs and find out who's up there. I went into each and every room. I opened up the closets. I checked every single place that a person could be hiding. There was nobody there. And I cannot find a rational explanation for hearing those footsteps. It was something that I could not explain any other way. So I had to go ahead and accept that there was no other conclusion that, other than that it had to do with what had happened to that child earlier that day. What was going on was not of this world. I was scared. I had to admit myself that if I wanted to stop being scared, I needed to leave right away.
People who work occupations that deal with a lot of trauma, once they're introduced into a situation where a victim who is in the form of a spirit or a ghost is present, that ghost might identify with that person as someone who deals with tragedies that they had gone through and try to connect with that person.
Now, how much of this did you put in your report?
I put none of that in my report because I could not put none of that in my report. My credibility would be called into question. I needed to return to the hospital to pick up the report that had been promised. I see a little kid.
Hey.
And I'm thinking, why is this little kid out in this area unaccompanied? This is, again, about 4 in the morning, and where's the adult?
Hey, what are you doing?
Obviously, he had gotten away from an adult or he was lost. And I'm following him down this hallway until I turned a corner and I found nothing there. There was no place for this child to hide. So there was no other explanation except that he was a spirit. I remember thinking, because this child had appeared so solid, that I thought I was chasing a live child that was lost in the hospital. I realized I was not dealing with something from this world.
Investigating the drowning death of a child, investigator Marlene Peliser begins to believe she's seeing the victim.
I believed at that point that this was the spirit of the child, and maybe he was just not really aware of what had happened to him.
When people see the ghost of a child as compared to an adult, there's almost a little bit of a creepy edge to that. They like to play a lot of games like hide and seek, so it's very difficult sometimes to tell what the intent of kids are.
Did you see that little boy?
Nobody seemed to notice him. It's almost as if he was invisible.
In particular cases, a ghost may appear to an individual rather than a group of people. It's generally when they have some specific intent, some type of message or some type of contact that they want to have with that particular individual. It might be just one person out of several that has the sensitivity to be able to pick up on a spirit that's present there.
Marlene cannot explain what she's seen.
Thank you.
When I received the report of what the drowned child looked like, I realized that it fit the description of that child I had seen. And that sent a chill down my spine.
Although otherworldly, it explains everything else that's happened.
I felt that it was this child, that he was aware of me, and that he had been the one that maybe caused a splash in the pool, maybe aware that I was a stranger in his house. And also, he was the one I had heard running upstairs where his bedroom was located.
When a child dies and becomes a ghost, they don't transcend and they stay earthbound. They generally are locked into the time period of the death. So if a child resonates with the age of 10 and believes himself to be 10, he will appear to people as a 10-year-old.
Because of this incident, Marlene will never see her job the same way again.
At that point, I asked myself, why would I be witnessing or seeing this child? And I thought, why me? Because I'm not family, I'm a stranger. And I thought, because of what I do, I worked with a lot of children, helping a lot of children. That was what my job was.
Do you think he knew he was dead?
I don't think he really understood what death was. Because he was so young, and I think in a way it had been sudden. And he just was trying for somebody to tell him what had happened, or maybe why his family didn't hear him or see him.
14-year-old Anya Davis makes her daily pilgrimage to visit her ailing grandfather.
My grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he was put into the hospital into palliative care. He was there essentially to die. He was in for about a month, and I went every day after school.
Anya is not alone in her vigil. She is joined by her mother.
I had a very close relationship with my grandfather. I'm an only child, my mom's an only child, and we were a very tight, close-knit family.
How you doing, Grandpa?
My grandfather always had like a very jovial attitude.
Grandpa, I made you a card.
He tried to keep a happy demeanor, but everything around him screamed death. I did not feel comfortable there at all. It felt very cold in the room all the time. And the sound of the beeping haunted me. Every day when I went home, I would fall asleep and I could hear it in my ears. I would wake up and I would hear it, just the constant, like, beep, beep, beep.
Afternoon turns to evening, the time Anya usually heads home. But today, she has a strange feeling.
I had school the next morning, but I decided that at last minute that I should stay.
She stays late into the evening.
I hadn't eaten yet, and so I was very hungry.
I can get something to eat.
And nothing was open. The cafeterias weren't open. They just had vending machines.
Thank you.
I went downstairs to get a chocolate bar out of the vending machine. The vending machine was on the first floor. It was late at night, so there was no reception and there was no one coming in and out of the hospital.
At this time of night, the hospital corridors are deserted.
I figured there would be someone at least around, considering how many people were in the hospital, but I was alone. It felt very ominous. It wasn't lit properly, and everything was dark and dingy. I felt extraordinarily creeped out. I really wanted to go home, but I just felt compelled to stay, that I needed to stay. I was determined that I wasn't just gonna go back upstairs hungry. Then all of a sudden, I felt this chill down my spine.
While visiting her grandfather in the terminal ward, Anya Davis is all alone when she feels a presence she can't explain.
And it just felt morbid and morose and just awful.
Many people are born with different levels of psychic abilities. In days with intense emotional energy, a person might be a lot more open to psychic information coming in and can receive that information a little better.
Anya tries to convince herself that it's her imagination playing tricks.
I'm reaching in to get the chocolate bar, and suddenly I hear something. Like a voice. I looked around to see if somebody had been talking to me, and there was nobody.
Hello? Anyone there?
I was freaked out. All of a sudden, I just hear this horrific voice that's telling me to go, to just leave.
Leave now.
I was terrified. I just needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. I just felt like there was an energy pulling me back up to the room that went along with this voice. As I was running back to the room, I saw a shadow person, and it scared the crap out of me. I fully believed that I was seeing some entity like a ghost. When I got into the room, my grandfather had died. I had never been exposed to death before, so the idea that one day I would be with him and one day he would be gone didn't really make any sense to me. At that moment, I made a connection between the shadow and the voice that I had heard downstairs. I believe that was my grandfather that summoned me back.
Quite often people will hear voices. Sometimes they're not sure who those voices are, but in many cases it could be spirit guides, family members, or even angels that will direct a person to a particular location.
And I believe that I saw him leaving the room after his death. Now, looking back on it, I am comfortable in knowing that that was him, but at the time I was petrified. I had never seen anything like that before. My mom told me afterwards that she also saw a shadow leave the room. And she believed that it was my grandfather passing on to a different plane.
As paranormal investigators, we look at that as a spiritual experience that should be viewed as a gift for that person. It lets family and friends know that the person's soul is okay and moving on to a different plane of existence.
I never really believed in ghosts before, but now I do.